results. So we did that before actually starting rehab. And then you might recall that we did 2 wells before summer. And we actually rehabbed well 3 twice because the first rehabilitation didn't give us the results that we wanted. And in the past, I believe it was well 1 required 2 rehabs to increase the specific capacity to the original value. And so we tried to take 2 shots at well 3. We took a break for the summer, and then wells 4 and wells 4 and 1 were rehabbed in September. And so the results from the rehab in terms of flow here, this table provides just a comparison between what the wells were pumping prior to 2023, when you had historic water demands within Baxter, and caused the pumping level in the wells to drop during 2023, compared to what was experienced, I guess, after now the rehabs were completed. So let's see here. You can see my mouse. In 2023, all of the wells were able to pump almost right around or almost 700 gallons a minute. And so your total capacity of all 4 wells was 4 million gallons per day. And the firm capacity, so that is, we call it firm capacity, the capacity with your largest pump offline in case you need to take a well offline for maintenance, what you can pump with that well offline. So the firm capacity in 2023 was 2.9 MGD, which is right about at the 2013 design flow, the last time the pumps were replaced. Then looking at November 2024, so this is after all the rehabs were completed. You can see our maximum flow rates out of the wells, with all the wells running wide open. Only well 3 was able to pump more than 600 gallons a minute, with wells 1, 2, and 4 between 5 and 600. And so the total capacity even after rehab, after the really high demands in 2023, it dropped to 3.3 million gallons per day. And so that's about 500 gallons per minute less, or 700,000 gallons per day less than the design capacity of the well field originally. And then the firm capacity, which in this case would be well 3 offline, is 2.4 million gallons per day. So the firm capacity is about 425 gallons per minute less, or 600,000 gallons per day less than the design. When we look at specific capacity, this is laid out, yes, in rows instead of columns here, with what each value means, but historically the specific capacity for all of the wells in the well field has varied between about 30 and 40. And all of this specific capacity really means it's how many gallons per minute you can pump out of the well per foot that the water level in the well is decreasing as you're pumping. And so it relates that flow that you're getting out of the well to the water level in the well. Before rehab, so after the 2023 high demands, the specific capacity had really significantly dropped in the wells, down to less than 20 gallons per minute per foot and as low as 13 gallons per minute per foot. After rehab this year, we were able to gain specific capacity back in all of the wells, but not back to the original conditions. And that's common in wells. You can rehab them, but you kind of get this, you get a decline in specific capacity. You'll rehab, you might not get all the way back up there, And you can see the decline and rehab, you kind of have this curve that drops off through the life of the well. You can't always just keep rehabilitating a well and getting the same capacity out of it. So the results varied a little bit, but we were able to get, well 2, we only saw a 6% increase from the rehabilitation, but we're well 4, we had a 53% increase, which is really good, but when we're starting from such a low value, it's really hard to get back up to that design value. And so the specific capacity has dropped, which just means that the pumping water level, in order to pump the same amount of water out of the well, you're going to see a lower pumping water level. Then relating this to projected water demands in 2025, there's a lot going on the chart here, so I'll just try to explain first what all the different lines are. The solid orange and blue lines are the water demands, the actual water demands in Baxter in 2023, the blue line here, and in 2024, the orange line. The dotted and dashed lines are projected average summer day and maximum summer day demands for 2025, and then the dots are different pumping scenarios. And so you can see in 2023, the dark blue line, the water demand was quite a bit higher than what was seen in 2024, and that was due to the drought. Primarily that was experienced, and so the water demands were typically anywhere from 2 to 2.5 million gallons per day, with some spikes up to 3 million gallons per day. So if we saw similar weather and water use patterns to 2023, next summer, our average summer day would be expected to be about 2.5 million gallons per day. This green dotted and dashed line, and then the maximum summer day would be just under 3 million gallons per day, this lighter blue dotted and dashed line. So in order to meet these demands, the dots give us how much water we can produce per day from the well field at different pumping rates. And so if we were to pump at 1,800 gallons per minute, which, go back, I'll flip between tables here a little bit, is less than what the wells can do right now, but for 18 hours a day. So the plant's not running 24/7. The well field is getting a chance to break each day, whether that's for maintenance at the water plant or backwashing the filters. We could produce a little bit under 2 million gallons per day, so that achieves, that's able to achieve flows like right now during the year, but it would be less than the average summer demand projected for 2025.
Just curious, why is there such a drop on, is it 9/11?
I think the plant went offline in this, so this is the water that was pumped from the wells. The wells, this was 2023. The wells must have went offline for a day or two, I don't remember what happened.
I don't remember what happened at the plant, but yeah, we were running rated water for a couple of days.
Yeah, so that would have been being on, yes, breaker water. Similarly here, the next line here would be 2,300 gallons per minute for 18 hours a day. So we're still, we're running the wells essentially at the maximum flow rate that they can put out right now. This assumes that the wells will basically maintain the condition that they're at right now, and they would be pumped at essentially their maximum flow rate for 18 hours a day, and that would allow us to meet the average summer per day projection at 2.5 million gallons per day, but that would fall short of the 3 million gallon maximum day demand. Whereas if we pumped 2,300 gallons per minute, the maximum capacity right now, the wells hold out, we would be able to produce more water than the maximum summer day. And so, there's a lot of information on that chart. What it all kind of boils down to is that the ability to meet 2025 demand is going to be dependent on the well and pump condition. If the wells maintain the condition that they're at right now, and we can keep getting the same amount of water out of them, it's dependent on that. It'll be dependent on weather, how much irrigation demand there is, with watering lawns or fields. That has the biggest impact on summer water demands. And then interconnect operation too, so Brainerd interconnect operation. The minimum amount of water you can get through there, which is 300 gallons per minute. And so in this scenario where the wells would be operated potentially at 1,800 gallons per minute total, or if the well field capacity starts to decline again, and you would need to purchase water from Brainerd. Right now, the minimum flow rate through the interconnect is 300 gallons a minute. In the past, Brainerd has requested purchasing consistent flow rate of water. And so just for, information here, purchasing 300 gallons per minute of water from Brainerd all summer would cost, right now, over $27,000 more than the water would be sold at Baxter's current rates. So you'd pay more to Brainerd than you would to actually charge your customers for the water. And then for reference, the well rehabs this year cost an average of $32,000 per well, not including engineering fees. That's the time that was the contractor cost to rehab the wells. So then, looking at recommendations to move forward, we are recommending to operate multiple wells in the well field at lower flow rates to reduce drawdown or keep the water level in the wells higher, so that we're not pumping them down so low. And so, for example, to produce 2 million gallons per day or 1,400 gallons per minute, we'd recommend running 3 wells at 465 gallons per minute instead of 2 wells at 700 gallons per minute. That just keeps the water level in the wells higher, and actually uses less electricity to pump the water as well. We are recommending to replace pumps for wells 1 and 4 to achieve up to 700 gallons per minute per well, because the next meeting, or in a few weeks, will be requesting authorization to advertise 2 new wells for bid that are spaced out from the 4 wells that you have. And so likely operation scenarios in the future would be to run wells 1 and 4 with the 2 new wells that are further away to avoid interference. And so in the future, you'll want to be able to produce 700 gallons per minute from those wells, which you're not able to right now. And so in preparation for the future operation strategy, we feel it would be a good idea to get some new pumps and motors in those wells. Of course, we're recommending to drill 2 additional production wells, and then also monitor the specific capacity and rehabilitate the existing wells as needed. And then also discuss wholesale water rates with Brainerd Public Utilities. So then next steps, seeking direction, or consensus from the City Council to request quotes for replacing pumps for wells 1 and 4. Cost would be a little less than $15,000 per pump, 5 to 6 weeks to install after ordering the pump. Just don't get the pump order delivered and installed. With that, are there questions?
Any questions, council? Yeah.
I have a question about the buying of the two new pumps.
Yep.
It seems like the wells are kind of the holding point right now, as far as like, the wells just don't have the capacity. What is the benefit of buying the two new pumps, even if, like, the recommendation is to run them at a lower speed?
Yep. So right now, we want to run all the wells at a lower speed, more wells at a lower speed to keep pumping water levels higher, because the 4 wells in the well field are really close. They're only spaced like 100 to 150 feet apart each. So you have 4 wells in a line that are about 500 feet apart. And so when all 4 of those wells run together, there's a lot of interference and the pumping water level drops down. Whereas when we drill the 2 new wells, we could run wells 1, 4, 5, and 6, and they would all be about 500 feet apart to minimize 500 feet apart each. And so we would be able to minimize interference, and we'd be able to pump more water, keeping the water level higher.
Would the two new pumps be beneficial with just the 4 running right now, or how? That's what I'm kind of struggling with, is like if the goal is to run all 4 at a lower level anyway, what benefit would the new pumps have at this point?
Yep. It would let you, it give you more flexibility operating, allow you to potentially run fewer wells if you need it, set you up for, our goal is to have the 2 new wells online in fall 2025, and so it sets you up already then to start running the new operating strategy as soon as those wells come online.
That's all.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
Cool. Thank you.
Before we go on to the modeling, I just want to let council be aware, as we've already started the informal conversations with BPU staff regarding wholesale rates. We had a temporary one when we did the filtration reconstruction in 2021, and already have engaged with them to look at that as being a permanent rate, so that we're not going back to a commercial rate, especially since the interconnect building is now has the ability to have water be pushed in either direction. So just want council to be aware those conversations have already commenced, and anticipate having a formal request in front of the BPU. I think it's their January meeting, so just those wheels are in motion already.
So just to confirm that the 27,000 or whatever that number was tonight, that's assuming no change to current, and you're working on that change back to the old.
Yep, yeah, the $27,000 for the summer assumes paying for the water at the greater commercial rate, but only charging your customers still what their rate currently is. So it's just the difference in the rates times the amount of water that you would be buying at 300 gallons a minute to have that consistent flow rate.
Thank you.
Next.
Next, we have is a presentation on the water system plan and hydraulic model report. Turn it over.
It's loaded up here and operating. So I'm Chad Katzenberger. I work with Kevin. I'm a senior engineer with SDH, and I specialize in water system planning and modeling. And so So I'm here tonight to talk to you a little bit about the work we recently completed for the city of Baxter related to that subject of modeling your system, developing some tools for water system planning moving forward here. So as a whole, this project was broken up into a couple different phases that all achieved different goals, all going to work together. So our first phase was updating your water system model. And what that really entails is a model is almost like a smart map of your water system, where we're able to simulate how the system operates on a daily basis, and then be a little bit forward-looking with things, understand where weaknesses are, and test out different solutions that we can find. Efficient solutions to improve your system moving forward. So we kind of look at the system as a whole, starting at the supply, out into the distribution and storage, and how the water moves out into the distribution system, and ultimately gets delivered to your customers. The second phase was updating water system demand projections. Kevin referenced some of those numbers. Those numbers are really a foundation for overall system planning, how many wells you'll need in the future, what production rates need to be, how large storage tanks are, water treatment plant capacity upgrades, etc. So those demand projections are really the foundation of all this work we do with system planning. With those tools in place, we then kind of stepped through and took a look at some very specific potential improvements and impacts to your water system. One key item being the impact of the potential interchange at the intersection of 210 and 371, and what that would mean if different sections of water main were to be taken into service. What's the impact? How much of that main needs to be replaced? And are you creating issues with it? So we'll step through kind of all those phases. The fourth phase being taking an ultimate look at your water system and developing an overall, I guess, vision for the system with regard to distribution, storage, supply, etc. So this is just a brief overview of what we took a look at for demand projections, just to give you a little understanding of how we went about making those projections and how we use them. So the first thing we always do, of course, is take a look at your historical demand use over time, on a yearly basis, daily basis, on a per customer basis. What do those demands look like? That helps us to establish trends. So now when we're looking forward into the future, we can take that into account in relation to population projections, future land use, and make sure that these water use projections are consistent with expected city growth, and consistent with your comprehensive plan, etc., so that the city can continue to grow. We have accurate demand projections, and the water facilities can be sized appropriately to assure reliable, consistent water service to your customers. So two different approaches with those demand projections, one being a population base, which gives us an understanding of how the demand can potentially grow over time on a yearly basis, looking out 20 years. That helps us to understand stage improvements. The other way we looked at it was, what could the ultimate water use of the city look like if every piece of developable land was indeed developed according to the projected land use and some amount of expansion. That gives us an idea for not undersizing things now when there could be the potential for things to grow much larger than we're seeing, in the next 20 years. That's really comes into play with things like how big water mains are, where the water needs to be delivered, and what rates, etc. So again, that becomes really our foundation for ultimately our demand projections, and how those are used for some of the work Kevin shared earlier, in addition to some other projects we'll discuss later. So with kind of that foundational demand piece in place, I mentioned earlier, we spent a bit of time updating your water system model and making sure it was consistent with current day conditions. So the model was originally built in the early 2000s. One of its primary uses was siting the elevated storage tank on the east side. basically take that model and update it to match current system mapping. So every pipe that's been added since the original construction, updated demands, and then probably the most important step was we took a calibration step. We actually went out in the field, collected pressure data, flow data, brought that back into the model, made sure that we had a good amount of confidence in the model that was actually simulating and producing results that are consistent with the real world. So when we use these tools and we're making decisions out of it, we want to make sure that it's just legit, consistent results with the real world. With that model in hand, you do a lot of things with it. Kind of the bread and butter use of the model is taking a look at system operations, system pressures. What do those look like across your distribution system at different demand levels, different conditions, available flow, bottlenecks in the system, piping. Important one is available fire protection flow. So in addition to providing drinking water, your water distribution system provides water for fire protection. So there's ways we can simulate and understand how much water could be available in the distribution system in different locations, which is really a good indication of undersized main and where improvements need to take place. Beyond that, there's a number of other ways we use the model, which I won't bore you with, but we're able to simulate operations over time and then really take a look at how different changes in your distribution system, like the 210 and 371 intersection, piping removal, would impact operations. We can use those tools to make decisions for future facilities. So speaking of that, with the model, updated and calibrated and kind of run through its paces, we then are able to take it and start looking at specific system issues and problems and help find solutions that are efficient and provide a high value to the city. So this is a prime example of that intersection in 210, 371. If that project comes to be, there's a fair amount of existing 12-inch water main that bisects the highways that potentially need to be relocated to accommodate highway construction, grade changes, etc. So what we were tasked with doing was simulating the operation of your system with that pipe taken out of there. So we wanted to understand, hey, if this pipe is removed, what are the true impacts? What needs to go back in its place if it is indeed removed? So the long and short of it was we were able to prove to ourselves that, hey, a lot of this water main can be removed and taken out, and the system has been built sufficiently that just a short segment needs to be put back into place in order to continue reliable, consistent operation across the system. So there's that red dotted hatch line represents the pipe that would go away, and there's not any current customers connected to those segments of pipe. So right now it's really just providing a transmission role in your distribution system. In place of that pipe, essentially you'd be connecting on the west side of 371 and connecting that pipe up to Excelsior or thereabouts, somewhere in that vicinity to keep things looped. So with our model operation, we're able to compare current system operations and then this proposed, resegmentation of the main and prove to ourselves that indeed that would be a viable, realistic solution moving forward. Some other examples, we took a look at on the west side of the city. I mentioned earlier fire flow availability. We've heard that on the west side, when Amazon was going in, that they were able to design their fire protection system for what was available, but when we look at what you would hope to have for different commercial and industrial areas, the available flow on the far west side was lacking, which is expected because it's sort of a dead-end area, and we expect that to get better over time as additional main is built in and connected, in addition to looking at that area as a potential site for a future water tower, an elevated storage tank down the road. The graph on the right there kind of represents available flow, which represents fire flow, and as you you kind of see the sequential increase to the right represents more and more flow available. I won't get into all the nitty-gritty details, but essentially we took a look at a number of different pipe combinations and what their impacts were with relation to both fire flow availability, consistent pressure, and again, system operation. So that we can really understand that, hey, when development allows for additional trunk mains built, what does that do for the system? How much is the fire flow going to increase? And will that be, enough to boost the flows to a level that we're more comfortable with? That option one around Mapleton Road was another segment we looked at. Was maybe the demand or development pressures weren't going to necessarily allow that to be built sooner than later, but is that a more critical piece than the areas to the north? So again, the model is able to give us a feel for what are the true impacts of those improvements and which ones would be priorities, and then the city can take that into consideration with what's most likely to be built first, and if you can plan for those improvements with the development versus having to separately build a project. Is really what we were looking at there. And then further on, being forward-looking, that eventually the city may need another elevated storage tank. As demand keeps on growing, additional storage will eventually be required. So we wanted to take a look at what's the next likely location for a storage tank. And the west side of the city makes a lot of sense with regard to where the existing tanks are located. This area is pretty far removed from the other storage tanks, thus lacking fire flow. So adding a storage tank on this side of the system really would bolster available fire flow. In addition to that, we did some modeling to confirm that the way the pipe grid is laid out would allow a storage tank on this side of the system to operate reliably with the other tanks, filling and emptying at a similar rate. I think the big takeaway here is there's options to increase available fire flow through right-sizing water main that's going through potential future development. In addition, this is the very likely spot for the next water storage tank when the time comes for that tank to be built. Another, example of that with regard to fire flow availability and potential development facilitating trunk water main. This is commercial areas north Whiter Road along 371. Just the nature of development in that area has been, continued along 371. And though there's, sort of looped pipe on either side of 371, there's not a really direct connection to that north water tower. So the further you move north, away from the water tower along 371, fire flow availability will continue to be reduced the further you get away. So this simulation with the model allowed us to take a look at the impacts of future trunk main that could be installed if development allows, and what that does to fire flow. The takeaway there really is, with a key trunk main installed, which we're calling their option 2, the fire flow nearly doubles compared to what we were seeing prior to that, especially those areas that are further north. Again, this will allow us to right-size those future trunk mains. Is it an 8? Is it a 12 inch? Is it 16? And so to confirm future operation of how those mains come into play, and allow the right size main to be selected to justify moving forward with the development. Beyond that, we took a look at some other key trunk mains. I had mentioned the future planning map that we were working on. There had already been kind of an ultimate system developed that had envisioned where future mains might be installed, how they might function, etc. And there were a few key areas where I think there's been a question of When should those segments be installed? Do they need to go in sooner than later? Or could they wait until, again, development would allow that to be installed? Or do you need to make it a specific project that puts in that main to function and provide transmission capabilities? So this was an effort where we took a look at, again, storage tank operation over time, and what are the impacts of installing that segment of main. And again, using the model, we were able to compare the before and the after and understand those impacts. And the conclusion we came to was basically, yes, installing the main is a benefit, but not installing it or waiting for development to allow it to be installed is probably the right way to go, because the net benefit of installing it here and now is not, it's not a noticeable impact with regard to storage tank operation and transmission and the actual work that the main is doing. So that key segment, again, the ultimate recommendation there is to wait for development to allow for that particular main to be installed. So, taking a look at all these factors as a whole, our demand projections, the work that Kevin had mentioned with regard to well planning, future treatment plant improvements, etc. We've got just a trigger chart shown in here, and I apologize if this is a little bit busy, but this is sort of a culmination of our system analysis, our demand projections. And I mentioned earlier, we do population-based demand projections so we can understand the time frame in which we expect demand to grow. So that'll correlate to when you need to build the next well or storage tank, etc. So this, on the bottom axis shows historical demand. Then we get to 2025 and we start looking forward at projected demand. And Kevin had mentioned earlier, needing to have enough wells for capacity to satisfy your maximum data demand. So that's one of the key demand projections we look at is, what is your biggest day of use and what is that potential? Oftentimes we'll see that on a warmest day of the summer, when folks are watering, using water outside, etc. That's when you'll often see your maximum data demand. So we talk about maximum data demand, it might not occur every year, but it has the potential to occur depending on if you have a drought year and what the weather conditions are really driving. So we want to be conservative in size of facilities to be able to satisfy and meet that demand. So we want that firm capacity to remain above the maximum data demand. So you'll see that first major improvement notes the two wells that Kevin mentioned earlier, wells 5 and 6, bringing the well capacity up above the projected max data demand, which buys quite a few years before the next well would need to be built, which we're showing just past 2030 for well number 7. And prior to that as well, we're noting potential water plant improvements, which would really just optimize the operation and allow for more consistent flow and the treatment plant to match well capacity and hopefully reduce run times on the plant as a whole. In addition to that, we take a look at projected average data demand with regard to storage tank volume and when the next storage tank might be required. There's a lot of factors at play there, but this is really kind of our foundational trigger chart, which helps track those proposed and future improvements and when they might be needed over time. This is just a quick rundown of how we are using the ultimate system planning map. I mentioned earlier, one of our major tasks was developing out, updating a vision map. And really what that is, it envisions where the future trunk mains are going to go, the future water storage tank, and how the water is going to move across the system. Here we're just kind of calling out some of those key improvements with relation to that ultimate system map. The additional wells I mentioned earlier, plant capacity upgrades, noting the 371-210 interchange, pipe changes, west side improvements with the looping, the fire flow looping improvements, and some other key water main segments. Again, what we're able to do with that ultimate system map is we have that built into the model as well. So we can be really forward-looking in seeing how the system is going to potentially operate when those future demands are added to the system and when different pipe improvements are installed. That really, allows for maybe a more consistent and efficient way of sizing future facilities. We don't want to undersize things, but at the same time, we don't want to oversize things either. We want to optimize how big the mains are to be really right-sized and not overspend, make the right choices with regard to how those facilities really need to function. So I guess with that, threw a lot of information at you guys, but any particular questions come to mind?
Council?
One thing that's maybe not on the technical side, it's more just you referenced, summer demand versus winter demand and spikes due to weather. I just want to clarify that a lot of the expense and need for upgrades, it's sounding to me like it's driven not by people are drinking more water or bathing more or other core human needs. We're really talking about irrigation as a major driver for these spikes in demand. Is that fair?
That'd be fair. I would also add it's pretty common across all water systems, especially Minnesota, to see those high uses in the summer. Depending on where you go, weather really dictates and drives water use as a whole. And I would say that the nature and magnitude of kind of your higher summer demand, it's pretty consistent with a lot of communities that I work with. And compared to some communities, not as severe. There's some where I'm very surprised at how high their summer use is compared to their average day use. So one of the metrics we typically look at is called the max day to average day ratio. So your biggest day compared to your average day. And if your biggest day is 3 times your average day, that's kind of getting up there. You guys are right around 2.25 or so of that ratio. I've seen other communities that are upwards of 3+. But I would agree that the driver is in the summertime and outdoor water use, irrigation, washing cars, etc. All that water use that wouldn't occur in the winter.
Thank you.
Chad, are you working with any cities that are mandating restrictions every other day, or?
Yeah, they're definitely out there. There's a lot of different kind of opinions with uneven watering, water baths and things like that. There's some line of thought where if you do uneven watering, people are going to water more on the days that they can water, which isn't big, but the overall use ends up being the same anyways. But there are, different cities try different mechanisms. Some do increasing tiers, the more you use, the first X amount of water is at one rate, and then if you go up above that, it goes to another rate. We kind of call it conservation rates. It's kind of a mechanism that cities will use, but it's kind of always a balance.
Do any of those work?
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
Depends on me. Kevin, your
With
experience?
conservation rates, I think it does depend on the community. There's some communities where people are gonna water, no matter how much the water costs. And then the conservation rate brings in more revenue for the water utility at that point. There's some places where people aren't gonna water because have come down in the summer, because they are trying to enforce odd even watering, but their average day has gone up, so they're actually pumping more water as a whole, but it's more consistent through the whole summer, and they're not seeing the really high spikes that they were having trouble meeting at that.
Is that commercial and residential both, or do they have different?
Yeah, the odd even, they just, if you have an odd address, odd days, even address, you can water on even days regardless of what type of customer they are, I guess.
But in that one example that we looked at, we talked to Utilities Commission, that the actual usage for that year after they implemented the odd even, that the total gallons per year went up. So like us, we're at, say, 360, 380 million gallons for the year. Then we would go up to 400 million gallons a year if we implemented it. It didn't get rid of people not using the water, but it evened it out, like you say, so that you didn't have this roller coaster ride all summer. But it still put the demand on the water plant to produce that more, actually produce more water.
Yep. Produce water.
It's all over the boards. And if you can get a good enforcement person, you know, to go out there and drive every day and get on the one, you know, you gotta go at night, because most of the commercial areas at night, so you gotta go around and find out who's not setting the odd even, and then go deal with the businesses. I mean, if you did do enforcement, you know, but it's a full-time job all summer, until you get everybody actually following it. We have done it in the past, we've done it several times in the past, the odd even. Just on the honor system, we implemented it back in the day, several times since I've been here. Didn't really see a difference in the water usage, but we tried. We've talked about conservation rates 3 different times in the 25 years I've been here. Like I say, we've had presentations where some communities it really helped, some communities it didn't. One of the things that I always bring up is that you need to change the landscaping ordinance. You gotta get the landscaping ordinance not to require irrigation in the commercial. You gotta go to some other type of landscaping that doesn't require irrigation. You cannot get grass and trees to grow in this sand country without irrigation. So you gotta change the ordinances too, would really help. And change how we landscape these businesses. Because the businesses are the biggest share of the lawn irrigation in the summer. It's the big lots, I mean, they're watering, they start watering sometimes, some of those places start at 8 o'clock at night till 8 o'clock in the morning, they're going 12 hours around the clock, watering their entire perimeter. So, just food for thought. I'm not against it. I just, what do you want to do? You know, what do you want the city to look like? What do you want to do for expansion? Some of this, though, is being caused by the expansion of our building. I mean, we're building so many apartment buildings, we're putting so many new homes on a year. I mean, we just finished South Forest View, now that you've got 100 and some homes coming on there in the next 5 years. So some of it is the growth of the system adding to it year round, because you see it on the year round. You know, we used to be at only 10, 15 years ago, we were at about 500,000 gallons a day consistently all winter. Now we're about 625,000 gallons a day all winter long. So we have grown, you know, besides just the watering in the summer. But right now, we're only at 600 to 700,000 gallons a day is all we have to produce for water to meet the demands of the winter. So that tells you where we're at. I mean, it's the 5 months in the summer that really is. But it also is some increase in stuff in the summer of the usage too. The car washes almost double in usage in the summer, unless you have a nice winter. Like, you know, if you have warm enough winter, so them car washes go all winter, then it didn't dip down. But you know, you got our car washes, some of them are using a million gallons a month per car wash. So you know how many different car washes we have around town. So big demand for car washes. And then the Like I say, the big apartment buildings too. The big apartment buildings, you see a big increase in the demand as they come online. And we got another one, you know, coming in the works here in the month of January. It's going through P and Z and City Council.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else, council? You got more?
Nope, I'm done.
Not good news for tonight.
We thought you'd ask more questions.
Yeah. Took, listened to the audio on at the Utilities Commission on both of these presentations, and they took both, I think, over 40 minutes apiece, and so anticipating how long these are gonna be, and that's the reason for the start early. I just want to note that,
Is that longer rated?
I do want to note that the acceptance of the hydraulic model report is on the general regular scheduled meeting under consent. It's just to accept the report and so we can close out the contract